Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to Part 4 of the webinar series, an in-depth look at what SAP S/4HANA can do for your business. Today's event is entitled How to Choose the SAP S/4HANA Path That Meets Your Business Unique Needs, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by Illumiti. My name is Steve Paul. I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenter, and later in the program we'll ask for your feedback. This webinar contains audience polling, so please complete the polls when they appear, and thanks in advance for your participation. You can participate in our Q&A session by asking questions about the information presented in this webinar at any time. Just type your question into the text box located at the bottom left of your console and click the Submit Question button. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentation. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and you can download a PDF copy of the presentation by clicking on the Download Slide link in the resource box on the bottom left of our console. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. And if you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help question mark icon on the bottom right of our console. If slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser. And now on to the presentation, How to Choose the SAP S/4HANA Path That Meets Your Business Unique Needs. Discussing today's topic will be Lorraine Howell, Vice President, Research and Development with Illumiti. Before we get started, though, we'd like to just remind our audience that this is the fourth of our webinar series. And here is a look at the other three in the series. There's a link on your console, so you can click on that and register for any of the webinars that you may have missed. And we greatly appreciate it if you wanted to check those out. Before we get started, we also want to just ask our audience a quick poll question. And so here we'd like to know, when do you think your company will make the move to SAP S/4HANA? Will it be in less than 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years, or over 4 years? And while we wait for your responses, I'd like to reintroduce Lorraine Howell. She will be our presenter. Lorraine, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Steve. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good.
And we've been asking this question over the other events in the series, got a lot of great response. Do you have any idea what this group might say?
Yeah, so I'm sure there's a lot of people that have been on all of the webinar series presentations, and most of them have always voted in the 1 to 2 years. So I would be expecting the same. I'm sure we've got some additional people attending today, so it will be interesting to see if they can sway that a little. Maybe just listening to the webinar, they've all got a little bit keener and want to do it in less than a year. That would be pretty exciting. So we'll see.
Okay, great. Well, let's share the results with the audience, and it looked like you were pretty much on track there.
Yeah, very much what I expected, and from what we've seen with the other webinars. So interesting, everybody. 1 to 2 years is very soon as well. So there's a lot of work to do, and for those even in the 3 to 4 year gap, that's not so far in the future either. So there's lots of work to be done.
Okay, well, over to you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Thanks for the introduction, and hello to everyone. Today is our fourth webinar, and I'm looking forward to actually going over the content with everybody today, because there's a lot of content and there's a lot of food for thought that I think will help you as you start working out your transition. So yeah, today we're looking at creating that roadmap, and this roadmap, as you'll see as I go along, is not necessarily just the short term, how are we going to adopt S/4HANA, but how are we going to actually roll it out over maybe a year or two, or as long as it takes to get everyone up to speed. So I want us to think in that context as well. So if you look at what we've been talking about so far, we said that you have to prepare yourself for that transition. And in order to prepare yourself, and that's what we've been concentrating on, we haven't really spoken about the transition itself. And today I will talk a bit about that transition. But up until now, we've really talked about preparation, getting yourself ready. So understanding S/4HANA, understanding what's going to be affected in your system in terms of of S4HANA, building your business case, and then today we're concentrating on the how. In other words, what is that strategy? How is it different for my company versus anybody else that's on the webinar? And what do I do to go forward in planning my actual migration itself? So I have an agenda or content for today that basically says that this is what we want to do. We want to build an adoption strategy and a roadmap, and we are going to look at certain assumptions. So the assumptions are that you have kind of followed my previous 3 webinars, or you've actually done the due diligence yourself, and you understand S4HANA. You understand whether your landscape is ready to move forward, and you've presented a business case with a variety of outcomes to your business and are now ready to make these plans. And the plans will include the adoption strategy we talked about, identifying yourself and your organization as to what you are and where you are in this process, and then building your roadmap. So what are the steps to build that roadmap, the priorities, the sequence, and so on. So I'm hoping that I can cover all of that today with you. And as Steve mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions, you're welcome to add them to the Q&A as we go along, and we'll try and address those at the end. But if we don't get to them at the end, we'll also answer them in emails going forward. All right, so the first assumption then, and part of the content, is that you have done the due diligence. So this is just a very brief recap of what you've heard in the webinars previously. And the first, of course, is understanding S4HANA. So you probably have had tons of information on S4HANA. You've listened to my first webinar where I tried to give you a high-level overview, and probably subsequently since then you've done some deep dive into understanding what this whole concept of S4HANA is. And this slide just represents SAP's overall view of what it is, basically talking about the fact that you have the digital core at the center, which is the ECC, the old ECC environment, now migrated or converted into an S4HANA environment that covers all of your business processes. And we talked about a lot of stuff coming to the core that used to be external, and you need to understand what all that is and what that means to your business. And then outside of the core, as you go through this roadmap, as you go through your planning, you need to consider the full digital landscape. And that full digital landscape means what are all the other products that SAP is promoting or suggesting to be part of your solution as you transform your business to become more digital. And that includes all of these cloud solutions that you see here, like, for example, Ariba for your business networks, like Hybris for your customer experience, like SuccessFactors for your workforce engagement, and then also things like IBP for your supply chain planning. And then outside of that, we talked a lot about, I think, in the first and second sessions about the SAP HANA Cloud Platform, where you can actually build and innovate and expand your digital footprint, always integrating, of course, real time with the business. So understanding all of those things and how they fit together is a good start. You don't have to engage all of these elements as you move forward to migrate to S4HANA. Some of them you may already have, some of them you might be thinking of, but it's good to be aware of these solutions. So that would be the first thing. Part of the process that we walked through was understanding what has changed within the SAP world. So this is now doing that transition assessment, looking at the in-memory database. What does that mean? What functionality has actually been simplified in terms of structures in the system? What are the classical stuff that you still have is not necessarily target architecture in the new world, but still supported by SAP till 2025. You need to have a handle on those things because that's important when you're planning your transition. And then what is no longer supported? The duplicate functionality, for example, that SAP is no longer supporting, or functionality that they had developed just for a handful of customers that they feel is now supplemented by S4HANA functionality, so no longer needed. You need to have a grip on that as well. And then the things that have come into core, right, like BPC, your planning, your consolidation, processing, your detailed scheduling from in the production planning area, and your advanced ADP that's come from APO down into the core. Understanding those pieces as well. And we already talked about all of the cloud stuff that sits on the outside. But these things are part of, hopefully by now you're starting to understand. You've attended all these webinars. Hopefully I've provoked your interest in these things, and you're starting to get an understanding of what this means to your business. And hopefully, I'm hoping that it means good stuff, right? Like it's going to improve your business, it's going to enhance your business, and you're starting to see SAP has actually done good stuff by moving to S4. It's not just that they're trying to change things and make you pay more for software. It's really enhancements to the way you run your business. So hopefully that's what you're seeing through the process. And then the next stage was, okay, now we understand S4HANA. What about the effects of this on my system? So every one of you have a unique environment. So here we suggested that you run some of the SAP standard business readiness tools or system readiness tools to see what the impact is in terms of that. And these readiness tools help you do a custom code analysis to see the effects of your custom code. You know, is there some stuff that's not going to work when you migrate to S4? Is there some stuff that you need to make minor changes to enable it to work? Is there some stuff that might become redundant? Doing sizing, you know, can you actually see the benefits of moving to an S4HANA database, because now suddenly the footprint's a little smaller, the data size, the database needs to be smaller because the data size is shrunk in a in-memory environment. Look at all the recommendations SAP makes about moving to the new functionality in terms of Fiori. Like yes, a whole bunch of new applications that are going to really make your business work better, and these are our recommendations based on how many transactions you are using today that have been enhanced in this area. Looking at the simplification list, actually doing it systematically, not just taking it's now a 906-page document and trying to analyze that 906-page document. You can actually run a system report that will tell you the impacts of that simplification list on your current environment. And then also doing all the business process analytics, understanding the impact on the business processes that you have and what that effect is. So then you kind of feel comfortable, yes, we can move forward because our system is kind of ready and we know that these things are going to change. So we're fully aware. So that would be the next thing to do. And then we talked about building your business case. And we said that one of the great tools for that is what SAP rolled out recently, the Transformation Navigator that helps you connect to your current environment, and then from that decide what you want to move forward to, and then start building out, looking at the value that you can achieve from that, and then ultimately getting to a real business case. And we talked about that in the last webinar, and we kind of highlighted the 6 main areas which Gartner kind of helped us define as the main changes that you would experience moving with S4. And this heat map is just a random heat map that I put together, but this is kind of where you would like to end up saying, you know, what's really important for me is the improved user interface and the real-time analytics. I love the fact that I have a simplified landscape from an IT perspective and all the new ways of doing business. So all of these things are important. Performance is important, but not so much in this particular example. And all the new cool stuff, the new S4 functionality is wonderful, but it's not a business driver at this point. And this is the kind of heat map that you would have built out of those previous discussions that we had. And then the Transformation Navigator itself gets plugged into, once you've entered all of these requirements and your priorities, and these are the things I want to achieve in terms of value, you can plug this directly into the SAP QVA, or the Quick Value Assessment tool, directly from the Transformation Navigator. And I did it for a mock company called Illumiti Mill here. But what it basically will produce for you is an estimated financial value of moving forward with S4HANA. So now you're really building a financial business case to kind of support the values that you specifically want to achieve, not some generic thing that SAP suggests are all the values that you would achieve, but something that's actually generated systematically. And then finally, going through module by module, saying, you know, this is the value you want, and this is how you will achieve that through the S4 implementation. So So really putting some numbers to the business case that we talked about last through this process. So if you've done all of that, you've now gone through the summary of the 3 previous webinars, and you're now ready to move forward based on understanding where you, as your organization, stands right now. So the next step is to talk about what we're talking about today, and that's the adoption strategy. And you'll find that you fall into possibly 3 different high-level buckets, depending on the outcomes of what we just talked about. And so the first thing is you might discover that you're a strategic adopter, meaning you've looked at all of these benefits, you've looked at where your system stands today, and you can see very clearly that there's significant business benefits that could be delivered to your business out of S4 right now. And SAP S/4HANA could support strategic business initiatives in your organization just based on the functionality and the capabilities that come with that. So we kind of put you in a bucket as being strategic in that sense. And then you could also be more tactical. And tactical means that I've gone through this process. I really do see the benefit. My organization really does see the benefit, but there's no significant benefit right now. We've got too many things going on. Our environment is too complex. We've got short-term initiatives that we need to address. We want to address them, with S4 in sight, but we can't quite make the move right now. So I would put you in kind of a tactical position where you can do a longer-term plan for moving forward. And then finally, you might really be in a position where you have no plans. You don't really want to move forward in terms of SAP even. Maybe you're considering another ERP, or you're saying, you know what, I don't really care about the maintenance that SAP is offering. I don't really use that. We've got lights on and we're functioning perfectly efficiently right now, so we just stay where we are. So the no plan kind of organization. So I've kind of removed that out of discussion for the rest of today because that we could talk to you separately on that. We're going to concentrate on the strategic and tactical adopters. So how do you proceed? So if you are strategic, so you can see you kind of bouncing along, in that particular case, you want to move as soon as possible, even if that means being an early adopter with associated risks. For me to suggest you take risks is always not a good idea. As a system integrator, I probably don't want to be doing that. But even Gartner has suggested that if you do the right planning, it's not always the worst thing in the world to be an early adopter, specifically if you can see real financial gain to your business in the short term. And so you obviously have to weigh those risks and see whether it's worth taking the risk to move forward as soon as possible. And then also weigh that against, the integrator that you're working with, their experience with moving people forward, and the market. How's the market moving along? And we could see that the market is moving faster and faster into S4. So that will make these kind of decisions a little easier. But then you might be the slower moving tactical organization, which is all good and proper, in which case you would just have to decide when you want to move rather than if, right? Like we know we're going to move. We know we've got to do it at the latest by 2025. We've got to be there already by then. So let's just kind of work backwards to see when is the latest date that we should do this. Or maybe there are some other tactical moves within your organization that could push you to move a little sooner than later because you don't want to do redundant work. You don't want to do an initiative that you're going to throw away because S4 is going to replace that functionality in 2025 anyway. So these are the things you can plan and start building your roadmap based on that. So those are the 2 areas we would like to look at. So going along, now that you've identified who you are, and it's all based, again, on all the good research you've done before, the next step is to say, there's two things that you've got to, 2 decisions you have to make is, what is the version that we're going to choose? Are we going to jump all the way to the latest and greatest, or are we going to take a step-by-step approach? And then that would be the transition that you do. So you've got to decide, this is the version I want, and to get to that version, this is the approach I'm going to take to get there. So those are the two decisions you would have to make once you decide where you are. So from a version perspective, it's pretty straightforward. You could stay on SAP ECC. No, there's nothing wrong with that if that's your decision. Maybe you want to move to the latest enhancement pack, and through the Transformation Navigator, you've actually seen some suggestions on how even doing just that, you can actually get some benefits that will prepare you for S4HANA later. Or maybe you're going to say, let's take the least risk option and just go to the Business Suite on HANA version where I'm just upgrading my database, but my ERP is staying the same. So I can get some new reporting, real-time analytics out of it, but I'm not going to get a lot of the new functionality and the new simplified end-user interfaces and so on from S4HANA. Or if I'm a very much finance-driven company, maybe I just move to one of the simple finance solutions. There are two. The first one came out in 2015. The next one came out last year in 2016. SAP has no future roadmap for simple finance, but it could be that that's your stepping stone to the full enterprise management solution later on. And then the final version that you could choose is, let me just go straight headstrong into the enterprise management solution, of which you now have three versions that you can choose from. So 1511, 1610, and 1709. And we could discuss the merits of all three of those. 1709 is brand new, so I can't give you too much input on that right now, although I'm upgrading my internal systems to 1709 next week. But when it comes to 1511 and 1610, I'm sure there's a lot of information you could get from your integrators or from us to help you make a decision around that. And then if you decide to go with cloud, I haven't concentrated on cloud today because I don't have enough time for that, but we could talk about cloud, and there are plenty quarterly versions that you could consider if you decide to move forward with a full cloud. And yeah, I'm talking public cloud. On-prem really covers private cloud as well because it's the same versions. But if you go complete public cloud, there are the quarterly versions that are available. So version choice is the one thing, and then the different transitions on how to get there. So these three paths SAP has advertised quite often, really talk about where you are. So, and we found like we're seeing all three of these approaches with the customers that we are working with at the moment. One is obviously a new implementation. That would be anybody that's just embarking on SAP. We would suggest you go with S4, of course, and you do a new implementation, and you would migrate your legacy data into S4. But there are a lot of customers out there who have been running SAP for 10, 15, 20 years. They've customized it to death, and they feel that this is the time for us to do a greenfield implementation. But we want SAP to help us migrate all of our data, and I'll talk about the migration cockpit with you in a second, to make it easier so it's not really a completely re-implementation. We can leverage all of our data, and we can use best practices, and we can get to the place we want to be pretty quickly, but we want to do a brand new implementation. So that's a complete opportunity that you can decide on. Or what a lot of our customers are doing is the system conversion. So we're going to take our ECC environment and we're going to upgrade it or convert it into S4. And the starting point can be anything. It could be ECC on enhancement pack 0 to 8. It could be Suite on HANA. It could be 1503, Simple Finance, or 1605. Or it could be S4HANA 1511 that you now want to take to the latest and greatest, or 1610 for that matter, right? So the system conversion actually becomes more of an upgrade, which I've kind of mentioned in my text there, when you're moving from 1511 or 1610 to the latest and greatest. So it's far less of a conversion at that point than if you're moving from ECC, because there you still have to inherit all of those simplifications that come with S4. And then the landscape transformation, funny enough, I've seen this as well. And I've seen it in different areas where obviously a company that's got multiple ERP systems and they don't want to upgrade everyone individually to S4, and they finally decided we want to consolidate our ERPs. They might be all SAP, or they might be a mixture of SAP and other ERPs. They like to go with a central S4 system and then just do a link from all of these systems initially. and what they typically would choose in that case is to use a central finance system. So we'd use S/4HANA 1610 or 1709, but we would activate the central finance business function in there that will enable us to do real-time replication from all of our distributed systems. And then finally, we would enhance the logistics within that environment and then bring our full environment into that one landscape. So that's another option as well. These are the adoption paths that you've got to choose, and hopefully through the due diligence that you've done before, you can get to a point where you can make that decision. Which path am I going to go along? So when we talk about all of these different adoption paths, SAP has tools, and we're going to go into the detail of the tools that will enable this as you go along. But if we're talking about building a new implementation, the SAP has now got this migration cockpit. It became available in 1610 in its first release. It's now released in its full release in 1709. We've used it already for 1610 implementations, where we've had to do a lot of the migration object modeler piece, which you see at the bottom of half of this slide, where we've actually built out a lot of the scripts and the templates. Whereas now with 1709, most of those templates for all of the different objects within the system are actually delivered. But you can migrate using this migration cockpit, very similar to LSMW, for those of you who remember the legacy systems migration workbench that came delivered with ECC, very similar to that, but more advanced. And it will really vastly simplify a migration from an ECC environment into S4, but of course can deal with legacy migrations as well. So this is one of the tools if you decide on that new implementation path. And then if you're going through the system conversion path, you would need to go through this process of discovery and preparation and then through into realization itself. Now, SAP's got a really nice link that I've added here for your reference, and you can go and click on this once you download the PDF. That takes you into the conversion guide. It's a PDF. It's only about 35, 36 pages, so it's not unreadable. And it actually takes you through all of the details around the different steps that you would go through in converting to S/4HANA. So I just cut and paste a couple of the index pages here, or the content pages here, just to show you that it actually goes into preparing for your conversion, going through the system requirements. And from a systems requirements perspective, it looks at, the fact that you need to be on Unicode, and if you're not, this is how you can get into Unicode, which would be probably a two-step process in your case for you to then move forward into S4. It talks about the ABAP stack. You have to have an ABAP-only environment. If you've got the dual stack with ABAP and Java, then it gives you all the steps for splitting your stack into the two before you move forward to do the migration. So all of those system requirements are dealt very well in the conversion guide and in the preparation for going through the system conversion process. And then once you understand the system requirements and you've got your system ready from that perspective, you then use the maintenance planner, which is very well outlined here as well, and it basically generates all of the download files that you need for the software update manager, and it does all the checks against your system in terms of what add-ons have you done since you started ECC, what business functions have you switched on in the switch framework. And it will give you advice that, if you've got something on and it's got to be off in S/4HANA, can you move forward? If it's off now and it needs to be on, what do you have to do? And then you'll have some of those business functions that are customer switchable, so you can have them on or off and it doesn't really matter. And it will tell you where you are. And also any industry solutions that you might be using, it will give you feedback on whether those are compatible with moving forward. So all of that is covered in the maintenance planner. The pre-checks actually look at the simplification list. So the simplification item list is actually checked systematically, as I said earlier, to tell you where things are going to change, and you can actually go into the details of all of that. It's actually very, very useful because you can click into it and see exactly what's going to change in your environment. And then the custom code analysis we talked about in depth in the previous webinars as well. And then once you've got all of that ready, you're ready to jump over the ledge, the Software Update Manager takes you through the database migration, bringing you onto HANA. All of this happens in one step through the Software Update Manager. So it converts your data to the HANA database. It does the software update to bring you to S4, and converts all of your data into the new tables, new structures, so that you're ready to go. And then after that's all run, you go through the application-specific activities, which is your usual old SPOW and SPDD checks that you're probably aware of. And then there's a very nice thing called an ABAP test cockpit that enables you to go and check all the code again now after you've actually done the upgrade. So you're then actually able to fix the issues right there and then to adapt your system. So all of these kind of things and all of the suggestions are covered in this conversion guide, like, what from an authorizations perspective, there are some changes and conversions that happen, and what are those conversions? Or some tasks, some of the content functionally, like credit management, some of the finance applications, sales order and contract management areas are changed, and how do you deal with those are all provided through this process. So it really prepares you pretty well to move forward. So I strongly suggest you go and look at that conversion guide, and you look at the steps, and you start preparing yourself for that. Even if you're not going to do it now, you can actually even run some of these checks ahead of time to see what the impact would be without actually doing the conversion. Some of these, I will warn you, you can't actually do unless you've already got your S4HANA licenses sorted out. So you might be stuck sometimes running some of these things if you don't yet have those licenses sorted out. So you need to talk to your account managers to make sure that that is in place if you are going to use these tools. Now remember, there are the business readiness tools that you've already used in the transition assessment we talked about earlier. These are more advanced tools that you will be using at the time. All right, so that's the conversion process. And then SAP also provides, and I wanted to add this in here, a really nice roadmap viewer that gives you a detailed overview of your migration project. So it actually takes you through that process from discovery to preparation, explore, and it's actually using the Activate methodology that you're probably now aware of to realize and deployment of your S4HANA solution. So each of these things, if you click on the link that I've added at the bottom and go to the roadmap viewer, you will see that SAP has a really good website where it takes you through each of these phases, so through the discover phase, through the prepare phase, through the explore phase, and helps you to get into the details behind that. So from the discover phase perspective, looking at the benefits of SAP HANA, SAP S4HANA, it actually helps you get into more detail around that. It talks about all of the solutions, the cloud solutions, all those things we talked about at the beginning where we've been preparing you is kind of reinforced through this process. And then from there you move on to the prepare phase, right? And in the prepare phase, you start looking at things like your organizational change management strategy, putting that in place. Looking at, we're assuming now that your business case has been approved, so you can enable your project team. You can do your custom code cleanup, and you can set your platform ready. You can get your infrastructure all ready to move forward. And you can see this is all done in this prepare phase. And then you move to the explore phase, where you can start looking at things like, what is the effect on my analytics? What are those core data services views that SAP talks about? How is that going to be activated as I go through this process? You can actually see this in the roadmap viewer. And then any fit gap analysis, if there are things that have changed where you have to transition, how to deal with those, this will be very apparent in this viewer. And then you get into the realize phase where you're starting to develop your training material, you're doing the tiny configuration changes that you might have to do for some of the new capabilities, and you're going to deal with security and actual testing of the system. And then finally, it takes you through the deployment and actually running on S4HANA. So it's nice. Like you're thinking about, oh my goodness, I've got to come up with a project plan to get myself through this actual migration project. Well, this is where you can start. And it's probably got more steps than you would need, but you can sift out what is relevant for your organization to get you to go through that process. And you know what? It's not that different to going through an upgrade project. It's taking you through the same due diligence, the same steps that you would go through if you were doing an upgrade, except it's providing the tools that's going to enable you to do the conversion as well. So I strongly suggest you go in and take a look at that. There are some things about if you do decide to go to 1709, a couple of pointers I wanted to point out. So maybe you're going to wait a couple of months before you go with 1709, at least until Illumiti has done their own testing on the system, or maybe some other customers have gone there first before you. But one of the things I did want to point out is that SAP has upgraded the HANA database itself from version 1.0 to 2.0. There's a lot of new technical benefits to that, like the active clustering and the scale-out clustering that is supported in HANA 2.0. But the technical buffs will know what that's all about, but there's a whole bunch of other additional tools and cockpits available in HANA 2 that will make things a lot easier. So if you're going to 1709, and in fact it is backward compatible to 1610 as well, so you could actually decide to go with HANA 2.0 already, even on a 1610 environment. But this is something that would be a prerequisite if you decide on 1709. And then from there, you can do your conversion right all the way to the S/4HANA 1709 solution. So I wanted to point that out so that if you are contemplating that, you are aware that there has been not only an S/4HANA upgrade, but also a HANA database upgrade that's fairly significant and beneficial at this point. All right, so now we've kind of looked at the adoption strategy. We kind of looked at what is the process we're going to go through as we do this migration from a technical perspective. The next step is really to build this all out into a real roadmap. And I think a roadmap is more than just what we've seen so far, which are steps in doing a technical infrastructure change. It's building out a functional roadmap saying how are we going to activate the functional benefits of S/4HANA once we go live. And so building your roadmap is something that becomes really important in the last phase of this process. And you need to have that actually documented and made available to your executives as well as to the project team so that they can see your plans for moving forward. Now, typically, if you're looking at so I kind of inserted here the longer-term roadmap because what we looked at previously does seem to be a shorter-term roadmap, and the shorter-term roadmap is let's just get to S4. You know, let us do whatever is required to make that conversion. But now that we planned that, what are the benefits to the company, and how are we going to leverage those benefits, and how do we put that in a roadmap? So that's why I kind of put that little insert that maybe what we're looking at here is a longer-term roadmap. But ultimately, if you're building any kind of a roadmap based on an IT architecture, of course, you're not only looking at that IT conversion, but you're starting at the top of the pyramid in this case and working your way down to the actual project where you're going to do this implementation. And right at the very top of the pyramid is your business vision and, of course, your IT vision. So both of those are important as you build your strategy. And then you go down to your adoption strategy, moving on into the process, the application systems changes that you achieve through the project. So the next slide just basically looks at those individually. So your business and IT vision, I think, you achieve in your preparation. So before you even plan and do any changes to the system itself, you need to go through that transition assessment and the business case development that we talked before. So get your vision in place. Then secondly, you come to what we just talked about now. What kind of adopter am I? And build your adoption strategy based on that. And of course, the best way to come around that strategy is to have a workshop of some kind so that everybody in IT agrees with the strategy in terms of technically how are we going to move forward. And then finally, to support your strategy, you have to formulate all of the principles that are going to get you there. And those principles include your business processes, your data principles, how am I going to handle my data changes, my application principles, how am I going to handle the application changes, and then the technology principles, How am I going to handle all the technology that we're going to implement during this process? So you build your roadmap based on those premises. And then that roadmap can look, this is just samples, or it can look in multiple different ways, right? Every one of you are going to come up with different rollouts. So you might decide, we're a strategic adopter. We want to move forward straight away. We're going to convert directly to SAP S/4HANA. And we're going to leverage all of the core data services views to get all of the analytics activated as soon as possible. And we're actually going to concentrate on this area of our business. So let's get all the essential stuff done, plus maybe a few other things. And then phase 2 would be to say, okay, let's tackle module by module or user group by user group, rolling out additional business functionality at that level. And then we continue this over the next 2 years, 3 years, and we put this explicitly in a roadmap so that everybody can see. We publish that and show the world this is what we're going to do. And this is when your group or your user group or your module or your division will actually start seeing the benefits of S/4HANA. But in the meantime, there are people that are already experiencing those benefits. Or you might be somebody that's more tactical. We want to go with Suite on HANA. We know that implementing HANA Live is kind of throwaway in a sense because SAP is moving to core data services in S/4HANA, but we would really want to leverage some of that reporting right now. And, it's not really throwaway because it's still supported in S4. It's just that it will be replaced eventually over time with core data services, but that's fine. So if we decide to do it that way, that will be our first step, and then our next step would be to move to S4, and then after that, we'll start the rollout. So there could be various versions of what this roadmap would look like, and you could get down to the level of detail that you want module by module to draw this out. But you really need to sit in workshops and figure this out together as an organization. All right, so then finally that should bring you to the point where you kind of now know what you want to do, right? So we talked about how do I plan, like you all realize that S/4HANA is imminent. 2025 is not so long in the future. For some of us that feels miles away, for others that seems very close. Have you started this process? And so the 4 webinars that we've done, including this one today, has been to try and help you think about what is the process I need to go through. So going through that innovation session, going through where I understand what S/4HANA is all about, going through the transition assessment, figuring out where my system's at and what's going to change and am I really ready from an IT perspective. And then building my business case, converting everybody to be enthusiastic. And you know what, the big part of that, it's not just waste of time, it's part of organizational change management, right? Like you preparing everybody, they're starting to get enthusiastic about what you promised them. And so it's so much easier to move forward with these technology changes so that with them because they can see or they can anticipate the benefit that's coming their way. And then finally you're saying, you know what, this is how we're actually going to do it. We've prioritized what's important and we've done this together with you guys. You've said, finance is most important. And then secondly, we need to deal with the plant maintenance guys because they are having the most difficulty. And then we're going to go systematically through sales and distribution, materials management, and so on. But you've done that together as a team, and you've built that roadmap to say how we're going to move forward. And in order to do that, because we're doing finance first, we're going to go with simple finance because that's the least risky for us, and we're a low-risk organization. Or we're just going to do Suite on HANA, and the whole organization is going to benefit out of reporting. But that's all for now, and then we'll go step by step through that process. And that will then get you to the place where you're ready to move forward. So that kind of covers what I wanted to cover today. I specifically wanted to finish a little earlier today than I have in the past because I tend to talk a lot on these webinars, and I don't leave a lot of time to handle questions. And I'm assuming and I'm hoping that there are a lot of questions today that we can address and answer to try and help you prepare to move forward through this process. And hopefully, this these series of webinars is not going to be fully comprehensive, because I certainly wouldn't have been able to explain everything about S4HANA to your particular organization. We did it at a high level to give you a taste of what you need to do. I couldn't run any of those readiness checks with your organization. You have to do that yourself to see where you stand and get the recommendations through those reports, like the readiness check and the Pathfinder report. I can't develop your business case through a 1-hour webinar, right? I can only give you the tools and the inspiration to go and start thinking about how you're going to do that together with your end users and build out that business case. And then also provide you links to tools like the Transformation Navigator that are going to help you do that. And then finally, I can only help you build an adoption strategy when we know the answers to why and what you want to do with S4 and how that affects your particular company. So this is just a taste of where I would like you to think about this, and then also to reach out to whoever you feel comfortable with in terms of helping you move forward from that perspective. So Steve, at this point, I think I can hand over to you. I now have one more slide with resources, which I have actually added at the end of all of my presentations, because I think these will take you into a lot of these things that we spoke about today. But over to you, Steve, to wrap it up.
Okay, thanks very much. Actually, let's push out the resource page right here for our audience while we segue in a moment to our second poll question. Also want to just let our audience know that we did get a number of great questions, and thank you very much. We'll take as many as we have time for. But here's your resources, and then here is our second poll question. We'd like to know from our audience, what do you see as the greatest obstacle to implementing SAP S/4HANA? Is it costs, fear of being at the bleeding edge, a lack of business case, executive buy-in, or you need to sweat your current system? So please select any of these options, and we'll share your experiences and feedback with our audience in just a moment. While we're waiting for responses, maybe we'll take our first question here from Godfrey. Godfrey wants to know, with the new simplified architecture and restrictions on ABAP custom development on S4, how does this affect custom codes when moving to S4 from your S4 implementation experience point of view?
Okay, that's a great question, Godfrey. So firstly, there aren't that many restrictions on customizations and developments that you do in S4HANA. In fact, S4HANA has provided tools quite often through Fiori front ends, but there are a lot of tools that are actually provided in S4HANA that enable you to actually add a lot of user exits, custom fields, and things into your S4HANA environment. I think what you may be referring to, and I might be wrong, is the S4HANA public cloud. In the S4HANA public cloud version of S4HANA, there is indeed a lot of restriction around what you can do in terms of ABAP and in terms of code, and even in terms of configuration in the system. And the answer to that, if you do decide to go with the public cloud, is that SAP has actually enabled the SAP Cloud Platform to be the area where you do all of your innovation. So you can still add custom fields and custom code through the Fiori front end in the S4HANA public cloud. But if you really want to build custom code enhancements, SAP has strongly suggested that you build them out as an application on the SAP Cloud Platform and then use the real-time integration between the Cloud Platform and the S4HANA cloud, public cloud for that innovation. But when we're talking about S4HANA on-prem or even in the private cloud, you still have the same ability to build custom applications and things using ABAP code as you had in the ECC environment. The only thing is through the conversion, of course, there will be things like the material master field length has changed. So any of your code that uses the 18-character length will have to be adjusted to deal with the 40-character length. But SAP, I know I'm killing this question because I'm answering a lot of it, but one other thing too is that all of the retired or or archive tables that the old tables that are now redundant in S4, SAP has actually built a view on the new tables that has the same name as the old table. So there would be a BSIS view on the ACDoc 8 table, which is a new table in S4HANA, that from a custom code perspective, it will still think it's reading the original table, but it's actually reading a view on the new table. So SAP is still very much still supporting that at this point, but not so much in the public cloud.
Okay.
A long-winded answer to the first question.
Outstanding. Great. Thank you. Anyways, while we're going to take our next question, might as well show the results of our poll question. And it looks like almost half say costs. Not too surprising?
Yeah, not too surprising. I was surprised at that last time, but that was one of the biggest things. It's like it's going to cost us so much money. How do we justify that cost? And I think part of that SAP's addressed now through the business case, actual financial business case development that you can do through the QVA tool that I talked about earlier, because I think you need to be able to justify why the costs that you're going to be spending, whatever they are. And I mean, that is something we should share with you, perhaps if you want to give us a call on that, so that you can see what it would kind of look like, and then compare that with the actual business case that you develop out of that. But I'm not surprised. And then you can see the lack of business cases is a close second, because those two are really very well tied together.
Right. Great. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, we also want to push out a survey to our audience. Hopefully they can respond to our feedback form and give us some thoughts on what you thought of today's event. Also, as a reminder, again, here's our webcast series, and here's the link to register for any or all of those webcasts. So we hope that you check them out. Now let's go to our next question. Let's see, from Bill. If we build a longer-term roadmap, what factors do you need to prioritize what should be focused on?
Yeah, so that's a natural next step in the roadmap. So once you've understood basically what your current state is and where you want to go, you then have to prioritize how we get there. And this is driven typically by evaluating the relative business value together with the technical complexity. So if what is wanted is extremely technically complex, then probably that will go slightly lower down in priority, even though there may be great business value. So you do have to kind of look at what is feasible and what has the highest business value. So you can actually build a heat map or a graph where you kind of plot out all of these business values versus complexity, and then you can prioritize on those things which give you the highest business value for the lowest complexity. And that's what we've typically seen in the roadmap build. And you should have your stakeholders contribute to that, obviously, to get to that answer.
Okay, and let's try to get one more question here from Jennifer. Can we treat a conversion to SAP S/4HANA as a purely technical upgrade and then only switch on the capabilities in a structured rollout?
Yes, so absolutely you can do that. And in fact, it is very advisable because if you do that, you're better going to manage the change to the organization. So I think, on any project that you're doing, OCM is such an important part of what you do. And I think the fact that you can do a technical upgrade to a certain extent, right, because I think I mentioned this before, there are certain things that when you upgrade to S/4HANA, they just no longer work. There are certain transactions that SAP has eliminated. There are certain things that you can only do through Fiori, through a Fiori front end, that you, like just bank account setup and so on. So you will have to make those adjustments, but other than that, it can be treated pretty much like a technical upgrade, and then you tackle the business units that will benefit the most, or the ones that push your buttons the most, to give them the benefit that they want. So yes, the answer is yes, you can indeed treat it for the most part as a technical update initially.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, that is going to be all the time we have for this session. So if we didn't get to your questions during our broadcast, someone will follow up with you over the next few business days. And again, for more information, please visit any of the resource links that are open before you. We want to thank you all for attending today's webinar, How to Choose the SAP S/4HANA Path That Meets Your Business Unique Needs, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by Illumiti. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email reminder so you can access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guest, Lorraine Howell, Vice President, Research and Development with Illumiti, we want to thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thank you very much.